So all these market related questions will not be touching. All right. So yeah, the idea of this particular session is to keep it to the basics. Whoever is interest, we can do a separate session altogether on whatever doubts you have. But as of now, for this session, not really. All right, so let's begin. Yeah, so let's begin. So the key idea is to understand the basics of financial statements today. Let me just, first of all, a lot of people initially they ask why this session and all that stuff. My simple answer to that question is I do have a very genetic passion for teaching. By genetic passion, I mean my grandfather, he was a migrant from Pakistan, and he came here and he had interest for mathematics. You know, I remember, I mean, at that time we used to stay in a village, and I remember he sitting, you know, on that so-called charpais and teaching people and his kids mathematics. So I think, and then, you know, they just flowed on. My father, he used to train CAs and account students, even though he wasn't a CA himself. And again, his interest for numbers, he's still working from indirect taxation. My mother, she is a Hindi literature teacher for over 20 years. Then my maternal uncle, he is a professor in director at IIT. So I think I have something you know, genetically disposed to the idea and concept of teaching. But the biggest reason which I feel is essentially this: there is essentially a lack of quality education. And by quality education, I simply mean that the education is highly theoretical, with really no, you know, it's like giving you the dots without telling you how to connect the dots. Now, if you don't know how to connect the dots, essentially you just keep on connecting dots. You know, there's a simple saying that knowledge and information are two different things. Knowledge is collecting of dots. Information is collecting of dots. Knowledge is connection of dots. So my idea is to, whatever I'm teaching, even if that's a very basic stuff, my idea is to make it as practically relevant for you as possible. Okay, so that is one big reason. And then the second one is very obvious. I have slightly, you know, hatred towards commercialization, especially for greed purposes. Now, by that I simply mean that, you know, we see a lot of, in India we don't have this trend, but in US we have a lot of people, and in other countries we have a lot of people who just want to commercialize this thing. Even though it's good to commercialize, I'm not saying you should not commercialize, but some basic stuff should not be made a, you know, a matter of commercialization. Something, of course, I mean, education comes at a cost at the end of the day. So these are my teaching interests. I usually teach on these subjects. Generally, my sessions are for MBA colleges and brokerage houses, and essentially I do take guest lectures and some, you know, some sessions which are essentially in conferences. So this is a brief idea about myself. I will just now take you to the basic subject of this particular webinar. Now, it's simple. I mean, the basics of financial statement essentially means that I'm going to talk about these three things. Now, even if you have absolutely no idea about financial statements, you generally still have heard people talking about these three things. There is something called a profit and loss account. There is something called a balance sheet, and there's something called a cash flow statement. Now, my idea, and let me make some very tall claims here. Let me make some very tall claims here. First, my idea is very simple. By the time we are done with the session, I want you to pick up any annual report and see all these three things in a light where you absolutely are able to make sense out of the whole statements which are given to you. So you can pick up a P&L and you can exactly know what it means. You can pick up a balance sheet and you can exactly know what it means. Obviously, you have to go in details yourself, but you will be able to apprehend what you will be able to comprehend what exactly this means. And the best thing which will happen to you is that you will be able to understand the conversation between the three statements. So how a P&L statement converts with profit and loss or the balance sheet and the cash flow statements. So these things is what I essentially want to achieve from this particular session. Now, my approach will be slightly different. I do not want to take you through P&L statements directly. That is something which I'll keep for later. I'm sorry, is the voice is cracking even now? Is it a common problem for everybody? No voice. Now, by no you mean no voice? Actually, that's manageable. No problem. Okay, I'll try to keep the mic slightly closer. Yeah, okay. So taking you through the statements now. Now, my key idea here is going to be that I'm not going to pick up one company and just start telling you, okay, this is a profit and loss statement or this is a balance sheet account. It doesn't really help a lot of people. So what essentially I want to do is that I will try to create a business from the scratch, and I will tell you how exactly you go about keeping the record of this thing. So once that is done, I really feel that in a lot of sessions I have been told that if that is clear, probably you don't really need to learn the terminologies. You understand the flow of a particular statement. So this is the idea of this workshop or this webinar. So let me just start by actually creating a business. Now, what we'll do is we'll try to create a business. We'll start with the ice cream parlor. In Delhi, it's a very relevant business. So let's start with an ice cream parlor and let's go from scratch about building this ice cream parlor. All right, and as and when we end this example, we'll be pretty much we'll be able to understand all the three statements together. Now, my idea about this, this example particularly will explain you these things: that how a business generally works, how business generally generates profits, how do you raise capitals to start a company, and how a company essentially goes about making those financial statements. Okay, so we'll be covering all these things. But let me start with the first step. So when you are starting the business, what essentially is the first step? The first step is to arrange the capital for business. Now the capital obviously can come from any sources. It can be your own personal money. You may not have that much money, so you can ask your father, your friends. If you are a big business, you can start asking venture capital, private equity, and in extreme cases, you can also decide to go to, you can go to public and ask money from public. All right. So there are various ways of it. Well, keeping it simple, we'll just assume that you have some own savings for 5 lakh rupees. As of now, just a small ice cream parlor. You don't need too much money. So you have your own savings of 5 lakh rupees. Then you get an investor. Now this investor could be, fill in the blank. It could be a father, it could be a friend, whatever. So you got an investor who also gave 5 lakh rupees here. All right. And you gave this investor a 50% interest in your company for an obvious things that, for obvious reason, you both have equal contribution to the in the particular company. Now, generally, it doesn't happen this way. I'm just keeping it simple. Generally, if somebody is even putting the same amount of money, he essentially gets less money because of active versus passive investing. But let's assume that you both have just started, and he said, okay, I'll take 50% interest only. All right. So because of the investment, you gave them 50% interest in your company. Is that fine? Yeah. All right. So moving forward, both of you will be recommended, will be talked as the owners of the firm. So I'll be using this term a lot, the owners of the firm. So both of you, the investor as well as you, will be the owner of the particular firm. Now you need some more money, but rather than going to another investor, what you do is you decide to go to a bank and borrow another 5 lakh rupees at a 10% interest rate. Now, generally, why do you take debt or borrowed capital, as they say? The simple reason is that you do not want to share your profits, because if the particular venture of yours is profitable, you want to keep the profits for yourself and just give the bare minimum which is required to raise the capital. Why can't you take more of it? Because if it doesn't, eventually the liability to pay the bank is yours only. Okay, so generally you go for a mix of debt as well as equity capital. Now, let me just stop here for a minute and clarify a simple point, which is essentially, again, made a lot of hoopla about, is the debt part. Now, be absolutely sure about this point is that not all debt is bad. Just mark my words there. Everybody keeps on saying debt is bad, but debt is not bad. Over debt is bad. If you take too much of debt which cannot be managed, that is bad. But some debt, on the other hand, is very essential for you to have, because if you have debt, you essentially are raising more capital at a very, very cheap, cheap rate. Be sure that the capital which you raise from investors is more expensive than a debt capital. Okay, so essentially because the debt person is not taking any risk. Is that fine? All right. So, okay, they just asked me why capital appears as a liability in the balance sheet. Let me just go through the balance sheet first. I'll explain all those points. Okay, don't get into the terminologies of the balance sheets in P&L as of now. Okay, as and when you understand the balance sheet, the concept will become pretty clear. All right. So let's move forward. Now, I go with the starting off. So essentially, you just raised 10 lakh rupees of owner's money, which was 5 lakhs yours and 5 lakh of your friend. And 5 lakh rupees was from the bank. All right. Now, if you sit on day one and you just start making a record of all the things which you have done so far, all right. So what are you going to do? You're just going to make a small ledger. Just let's say you just take a paper and you make a small ledger, okay. And you divide a line in between and you say, okay, on this day, the day of my starting, this is how my company looks. There are some things called sources of funds where I am raising money from, okay, and then I'll put this money somewhere which will be application of funds, okay. As of now, as on day one, all I have done is I have raised 5 lakh rupees as debt or as loans from the bank, and 2 people have contributed to this owner's money, which is 10 lakh rupees. Just a second. Yeah, so 10 lakh rupees. Now, what have you done with this money so far? Well, nothing, right? So essentially, as of now, you just have cash of rupees 15 lakhs with you. Okay. Now, this essentially, when you make a ledger and you write about your application of funds and your sources of funds, this is simply called a balance sheet. That's all there is to balance sheet. On one side of a balance sheet, you will have all the sources of funds, and on one side of the balance sheet, you will have the application of funds. You can have very complicated terms there, but the essence of the whole idea of the balance sheet is just this. On one side, if you owe somebody something, that will be there as a sources of funds. Now, answering your question, somebody asked me why is it called a liability. The term is essentially used because sources of funds from a company's perspective, now you separate yourself as an owner, from a company's perspective, the company owes the money which it has raised from other people. So whether it is raised from owners or it is raised from banks, the company at the end owes this money back to them. Okay, how will they pay? That's a different matter. And application of funds, on the other hand, voice is again cracking. Okay, let me just try again. Yeah, we can hear. Okay, I don't know what to do here. So, yeah, so the owner's money and the debt money is something you have to owe to somebody. So that is why it is called a liability. Now, somebody asked me, how is cash an application of fund? Well, yes, application of fund essentially means that you have a whatever funds you have, how are you putting them? As of now, you're not putting them anywhere. It is just keeping as cash with you. So it is not really an application. It is just holding that particular money, but you have to account for it. Okay? So whatever money comes in the business has to be accounted for. So either you write it this way, and you don't really, you're not applying it, but you're just keeping cash in your wallet. So assume that the moment you took the money, you have a wallet in your company. You just went there and you put 15 lakh rupees there. All right, so that all your company is as of now. Okay, is that point of liability clear? Somebody asked me whether VGS or somebody asked me, right? Yeah. Yes. All right, VGS. Thank you. So let me move forward. Let me just again start with this balance sheet and explain you the whole thing here again. So in a balance sheet, we have two sides, sources of funds as well as the application of funds. And both have to be equal. And that is how the companies can be, they can verify that whatever they have done in the particular year is absolutely fine, is that when they sit at the end, and they match their liabilities and assets, they should be equal to both the sources of the funds as well as the application of the funds. All right. Whatever transaction will happen, it will reflect here in the balance sheet. So at the end, they have to match, and that is the reason it is called a balance sheet. Okay. As in when we move forward, we will see why it has to match. All right. Now the balance sheet is always at one point in time. So just like we sat on day one after taking the money from all the people, we sat on day one and made a ledger or made a small paper of a reflection of the company. So at that paper tells me how my company looks on that particular day. Alright, it doesn't tell me how things have gone in last years, many years. It just tells me at that particular date how does the financial position of the company looks like. Alright, so it is a one point in time thing. It's like taking a snapshot of a company at one time. If you just take a snapshot, if you take your snapshot, you will see exactly how you were at that point in time. Okay, how you reached that particular phase doesn't matter. Okay, so it's just like taking a snapshot of the company. All right, so let's start building this business. If I build this business, okay, so we have all these things. For an ice cream parlor, I think all we need is these kind of things. First, we need an ice cream stall. Let's assume that it costs me 1.5 lakh rupees. Then I need some ingredients to prepare the ice cream. So the milk, flavors, sugar, and all these things, ice, essentially whatever I need. The ingredients cost me around 50,000 rupees. All right. Now then I have some machines which I need to prepare the ice cream. So the machine cost me 1 lakh rupees. Then I'm actually making a small stall sort of thing. So there are some fixtures, furniture, the lighting, and the board, the holdings, everything else. It cost me around 3 lakh rupees. Yeah, and also the money to bribe the food inspector. No, that is not accounted as of now, but yeah, we'll do that. Good point, Dinesh. So 2 employees, and we will take 2 employees here for 3.6 lakh rupees. All right. Now, so as of now, imagine yourself as the owner. You go to the market and you buy the first 3 things, and the 4th thing also essentially you buy and you fix and you install in the company. But on this, before you have started, have you paid your employees? Well, not really. You pay your employees only after you start your operations, right? So let's go forward. Let's start with this thing. So now you have spent all these things, spend your money on all these points. Now let's just sit and again pick out that same piece of paper and again make this whole application of funds versus sources of funds statement. All right. So if I do that on the sources of funds, does anything change on my sources of funds? Well, not really. I have not really gone out and taken more money from anybody. That I took on day one only. All right. So now that 15 lakh rupees was in my wallet, now I go to the market, I take the money from the vault and I just start making payments for whatever I am buying. All right. Now, when I use that, my application of funds will keep on changing, but sources of funds will not really change because I have not raised any money. Okay. So let's go to the application of funds. What is the first thing I do? Well, I buy some assets. Okay. What is an asset? An asset is something which is going to give me benefits in the future. Okay. If the benefit of this particular asset goes for more than 1 year, generally we call them non-current assets. Okay, but if the benefit of that thing is only for 1 year or less than 1 year time, we generally call it current assets. Now, as and when we go, the nature of the items will become more clear. So just don't bother about the terminologies right now. But the key idea here is that any asset which is certainly going to give me benefit for more than 1 year, I will take it as something called fixed assets. In the actual balance sheet, you will see it as net block, gross block, and all that kind of stuff, which I'll discuss later. Okay. Now, in this case, what you do is you buy a stall, a machine, the furnitures and the fixtures. So essentially, all these things are going to give you benefit for more than 1 year. You write them as fixed assets on your balance sheet. Okay, so the application of funds, now you have applied 5.5 lakh rupees towards fixed assets. Then you also went and you bought some ingredients which are required, right? But as of now, you have not started making anything. So you just imagine you just went to the market and you bought all the stuff and you just kept it in the storeroom. Now, since it is lying in the storeroom, you call it inventory. Okay, so in your business, whatever things which you need to make your final product, or after you have made the final product, you are not sold, but you just kept with yourself, all those things are counted as inventories on the balance sheet. Okay. Now, again, we'll see an example later on and we'll see what that means, but this is the basic idea. Things which you need to build your product and things which you have made and which you have not sold yet is still kept as a inventory on the balance sheet. Okay. So as of now, so you bought 5.5 lakh rupees worth of fixed assets and 50,000 rupees worth of inventory. Is it the remaining inventory of the end of the year? Forget the year. Let's not jump to all the things. All the things. I'll discuss all those things later on. As of now, know this thing that balance sheet is made at one point in time. So imagine in this business, I'm making this balance sheet immediately after making all these purchases, which is like maybe let's say okay, first 2 days. The first day I just raised the money and next 2 days I did all this spending and everything else. So I can make balance sheet any day whenever I say. In the normal course of the events, when you see an annual report, of course, what you are seeing is essentially what is there at the end of the particular year. But the balance sheet is as on that particular date. All right. So you have 50,000 rupees of inventory. So after spending 5.5 lakhs on fixed assets and 50,000 on inventory, you in your vault, you now have 9 lakhs remaining. All right. Now, just imagine this thing again. So you have 15 lakh rupees which you had in the vault initially. You spend 5.5 lakhs on fixed assets, 50,000 on inventory. Now, what is the total of the whole thing? It is going to be, of course, 15 lakh rupees. All right. Now, just imagining that vault idea again. If you take money, you keep it in a vault, and then you use the vault money for spending. The balance sheet is always going to match because that cash is always going to match. All right. Even if there is a siphoning off happen, you make a record in such a way that you will be able to account for that particular money. All right. So everything at the end of the day has to match. Yeah, we haven't really paid anything to employees yet. Okay, we haven't really started the work, so we haven't paid to the employees. And I mean, who get paid on the first day anyways, right? So I mean, we hope so, but we don't really get paid at the first day anyways. So let's move forward now. So on third day or fourth day, whatever, you now have this as your position of the company. This is your situation of the company. Let's move forward and let's start the operations. But before that, I want you to understand what exactly are cash flows. All right. Now, what are cash flows? Generally, we divide cash flows into 3 particular heads: cash flow from operations, cash flow from investing, and cash flow from financing activity. Now, essentially, you should be able to just distinguish the 3 items in the initial stages. The cash flow from operating activities is essentially if you're operating in any particular business, whatever item is pertaining to your business activity, that comes under operating activity. So if you are a shoemaker, everything which is as per the process of making the shoe and selling the shoe, whatever is according to your own operations, that part comes under operating activity. But the part of raising money or investing in assets, all that stuff doesn't come under operating activity. It's not your day-to-day activity, first of all. And secondly, you can raise money for anything. You can raise money to just pay off your debtors also. Okay. So that essentially an item which is different from your day-to-day operations. So day-to-day operations will come under your operating activities. So sales, marketing, you keep on hiring people, you pay your bills, manufacture products, whatever is on your day-to-day operations, that comes under operating activities. Investing activity, on the other hand, is the process of acquiring assets. Okay, acquiring or selling, whatever that could be. So anything which has to deal with either an acquiring of an asset or selling of an asset, that will essentially come as an investing activity. Okay, now as and when we take the examples later on, you will be having this far more clear. Few examples is that when you buy machines, you buy lands, you buy long-term assets. Okay, you even make some investments. So again, we'll discuss this as and when we move forward. Financing activities are related to the left side of your balance sheet, which we just discussed. Okay, so you raise some funds. Okay, first of all, that in itself is a financing activity. Now, whatever activity, whatever transaction you do in your company which has something to do with your sources of funds, that comes under your financing activities. All right, let's move forward. Okay, so on the day 1, you made, on the day 3 or day 4, you made the balance sheet of the company. That day only, let's just sit and make the cash flow statement of that particular company. Now, as of today, what has been your cash flow from financing activities? All you have done is that you have raised, cash from treasury operation. I'll cover all that stuff. Don't worry about it. So, as of today, all you have done is that you have raised money from few sources, 10 lakhs from owner's money and 5 lakhs from debt capital. All right. Now that raising of money, as I told you, has to come in the financing activity. So you have money raised via equity. Equity essentially means owner's money, and that is rupees 10 lakhs. Then you have money raised via debt, which essentially means taking loan from the banks, which is 5 lakh rupees. So cash flow from financing is nothing but raising of this 15 lakh rupees. Now imagine the vault again. If the cash is coming in your vault, okay, that's a positive cash flow activity. Why? Because again, the money is increasing in your vault. So if it is coming in your vault, the money is positive cash flow. And if it is money is moving out for whatever purpose, if you are taking the money out of the vault and you are buying a particular asset, then also it's a negative activity. Okay. So whenever you're taking money out of the vault, that outflow will be taken as a negative activity. Okay, so imagine the cash flow statement from a vault perspective where you keep your cash. Okay, so total cash flow from financing activity is 15 lakhs. Now we come to cash flow from investing activity. Now, what all things we have invested in this particular for first few days, for 4-5 days, we have invested in the machines and all the fixed assets we did, right? So the fixed assets were the only investments which we have made so far. Okay. Now remember, it is about acquiring of assets. Okay, and it is essentially acquiring of long-term assets, not short-term assets. Okay, so all the investing activity will essentially be about acquiring of long-term assets. Alright, so as of now, what we have done is we have purchased fixed assets, which is minus 5.5 lakhs. Why minus? Because I took the money from the vault and I went to the market and I bought all those things. Yes, Sridhar, investing in subsidiaries and fixed deposits come under this part. Investing in subsidiaries will come in this part, fixed deposits under this part. Yes, both the things will come under this part. You're right. No, Shavan, current assets will not come. Current assets, as I told you, this is only about the long-term assets. The current assets will essentially come in your operating activity. I'll go there and I'll explain you all those stuff. Okay. So the purchase of fixed assets is 5.5 lakh rupees as of now. So your total cash flow from investing is minus 5.5 lakhs. Alright. Now the only third activity which is remaining is cash flow from operating activity. But as of now, have you started your operations? Well, no.